Hello, welcome to today's HR Huddle. Happy May 2nd today. And Samantha is with me today from Las Vegas. She and Jen are at the BDO Alliance Conference. Thanks for joining me, Samantha.
Oh, such a pleasure.
We are going to talk today. We thought, it's conference season. It's what we would call proactive season in the profession as we're starting to emerge from the deadlines and the projects, and people are going to start to emerge. We thought it might be important to pause and say, what does that look like? And how do we make the most, of the next 120 days? And I know that we've really had kind of a continuous cycle the last few years, that it really hasn't let up. And, for a lot of reasons with, deadline extensions and projects and the pandemic, and also just the volume that we're blessed with, all the needs that our clients have. But traditionally, this is a time of proactivity. And we thought we should, maybe stop and say, well, how do we support our team members? And that includes our HR group. So for those of you that are HR leaders, or those of you that are service line leaders that are attending, but then also each of your team members, what does their time of proactivity look like, and what should they be focusing on? And then how do we best support them? So that's what we thought we would, take a moment and stop and talk about that as we're anticipating summer, and spring is here, summer's coming, and what does that look like for us on the business front? So, any thoughts from a setup perspective, Samantha, before we dive in with some ideas?
I just couldn't agree with you more that we actually do need to take stock of it. 120 days feels like a long time, and we feel like, we just need to take a breath, which we do need that break. But at the same time, like I say this to my husband every year, if we don't plan it, the summer disappears and we didn't do the stuff we really wanted to do because everybody else made their request, and then we didn't get to that proactive. And that's what you and I were really talking about, is just making sure we're taking stock of what's really the proactive, forward looking things that we need to do. And so I love that we're discussing that today.
Yeah. And I think the first place to look is there's so much tying up loose ends or cleanup. And how do we wrap up the projects powerfully before we move on to the next? Or, don't let them sit. I know it's, we all want to take a breath and exhale, take a couple days off maybe. And it can be difficult to wrap up things, or we move too fast into the next thing. And then we have this lingering, work and lingering projects to tie up, and updates and communications with the client. And I think that's something that we could probably do a better job scheduling and putting time on our calendars to actually do that. And whether it's individually or within our teams and with the clients, to say, how do we wrap that up powerfully and schedule it? I think often we schedule all the work to get the job done, but then it's really not done and it carries over. And that just causes a lot of angst, I think, and stress. So I think that might be a place that I start, is say, what's left? What do we have left that we need to do and to continue and, find out. And so, the mentors or the engagement leaders to figure out what that is and make it all in one place. Let's make a list of what all that is in one place, and then get that, scheduled and documented, and figure out how are we going to complete that. So that might be a place that I would start.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable. And I was actually just speaking with a certified project manager professional, and she was talking about how that final stage, like you were just saying, Tamara, that we just feel like it naturally happens, but too often it doesn't. And then it is these things that dangle on or don't really ever get concluded. Uh, but I guess I would add to that to make sure that we also don't prioritize finishing all of that and schedule that all out without starting to slot in where we need to start doing those proactive things, because we may
Right.
start scheduling out all of those finishes and then feel like, man, we're into July and we don't have enough time now to start some of these other things. So as technical as it might sound, Gantt chart it out or something so that we realize, hey, if we don't start by this time, even though we still may be wrapping a few things up, we are going to run short on time of getting some of these other initiatives going. So I think that's really important.
Well, and I think that's a good point. It's linear.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do some of these other proactive things also. I know it's performance review season for a lot of firms. So we're going to stop and do reviews. Where does that get scheduled in what week and how many hours? And where do we need to schedule in? Like you're at a conference right now, Samantha, we've got conference season, we've got CPE. We need to schedule those things in. And it needs to be on the calendar. It needs to be communicated to the appropriate partners and managers and mentors so that they can support that time to be able to do that. Otherwise, we will have people in our CPE courses and they're trying to finish an audit while they're paying attention to the CPE, and that's not going to happen. It's not effective on either end. And so if, that Gantt chart, I like the idea. I'm not a Gantt chart person, but I can see, how if you can line it up, you can figure out where that fits and how do you make that, flow. And, a lot of your HR initiatives, the performance review season, we're going to be doing campus recruiting. We're going to be doing some interns probably coming on board this summer. How do we line that up and say, how does that all fit? And what does that look like week by week? And, how much time and who's dedicated to it? And what does that look like?
Yeah. And I think the other piece too, and I'm hearing this an awful lot, the challenge of finding the quality team members and staff is really a challenge for professionals. There has to be that time where you're exploring what does new recruiting strategies look like. And so where does that fit, that either you work with your own team to brainstorm that, or if it's just you, who can you connect with outside your organization to get those fresh ideas, so that we don't just go with the same old methods, which aren't necessarily as effective as they used to be. And especially with, more of the people working remotely, and that really does open the talent pool, but that really does mean that there's additional strategies. And in that same vein of not just doing the same as last year or the same as every year, that needs to be evaluated for the CPE too. So, where you're talking about the CPE that we need to get in, you mentioned I'm here at a conference, and we're just talking about how important it is that firms are investing in the future services of their firms. So what are the skills that need to be in the team, and what kind of services are we trying to build out, and making sure that the talent is getting trained in being able to deliver those, so that you're adding more value to your firm, you're adding more value to your clients, which means that your team has to invest in that. So it's not the same old training courses that we've always done, and there needs to be time to plan and scope those.
Yeah. Well, and we always like to say that you go to CPE or you go to a conference, and the people that go, so Samantha and Jen are going to come back with all this pixie dust, all this conference pixie dust, and they're going to have all of these ideas, and we need to do this, we need to follow up on that, and we've been talking about, this kind of, curriculum for years. It's time for us to do it. We're all back here working, and we're going to say, all right, calm down. We'll wait for that pixie dust to kind of flutter off of there. But it really is important to stop and debrief about those ideas and support those ideas and prioritize those ideas. And I think that's whether it's at a conference and come back and say, what did I learn? Where, how does this fit into our priorities? If I were to pick one thing, what would we go back and do? Same with CPE. They're going to learn new skills. Your people are going to learn new skills. They're going to have new ideas for how to maybe, communicate or run engagements, or maybe a new tool to use. And we want to support people in trying those things. So that's part of the proactivity also. Like, what follow-up are we doing as they're learning and they're coming up with ideas? We talked a couple of weeks ago about, building a firm that they want. And so we have to support and empower them to try some of these ideas, because I know it can be really easy to, poo-poo it and minimize it, and just say, all right, just settle down there. Yes, I hear you. I'm glad you're all excited and you had a good conference. But truly, that's how we're going to continue to propel ourselves into the future, and those, new service ideas that you're talking about, Samantha, or those, new processes or workflows or technologies or creative ways, for staffing, whatever it might be. We have to come back and we do have to talk about that. So that's part of that scheduling also. Otherwise, we get swooped right back up into our calendars and our email and everything else. And that kind of falls to the wayside again. So
yeah, I would really, especially, as the HR professionals and you're signing people up for these trainings and events and so forth, challenge them to identify what's the 1 to 2 top items they took out of that, and then work with them on the accountability of following up with it, because people may go and they're getting their compliance education and updating on that, and all these other ideas sound cool and exciting, but nobody is going to listen to this when I get back to the office, just like you said. So as the HR professionals, challenge them with that. I'm gonna want to see what's the 1 to 2 ideas that you brought out of there that isn't something the firm is already doing, and then let's explore that. And it might not fall as an immediate action, but maybe we're going to pick this back up in a couple months, and just to create that accountability with them so that they know you're genuine and you're serious about that.
well, and help them get visibility. I think that's
Mhm.
important too. Our transformational leadership program, they have to do a presentation at the end, and we do that virtual for our public programs. If it's an infirm program, we do it in front of the board, and often they're infirm coaches, and they share in 4 to 6 minutes, with how they grew as leaders, but also what they produced in the firm, what
Mhm.
results that they produced. And it's eye-opening, first of all, for those leaders to hear that and see the investment pay off, but also the growth and the change that they have made, in the firm, and the results that they have produced. And I think that's really important to help people get that visibility. So maybe they come back with some ideas. How do we get them to have visibility with the talent committee, or with the tax committee, or with the board? If it's at that level, and just finding ways for them to be able to share those ideas and elevate them, I think is really important. So we have to figure out how can we empower them. And as HR thought leaders, you come back from conferences or webinars or reading that you're doing on social media, and how do you prioritize that and bring that learning? And we have to socialize it. We have to talk about it a few times, that people might not catch on the first time. It's like I want them to jump on immediately, but if I can share it and then show examples and then maybe practice it, and then they can start to see it kind of come to life. And so from an HR and new ideas and new tactics, and maybe a new way we're going to do reviews this year, and whatever that might be, how do we start to bring that up and have that visibility? But I think that visibility is key with a lot of these ideas.
And when you're bringing those ideas as well, like you said, Tamara, some people are going to say, I don't even know that would work, and want to
Right.
shy away. So one of the things that you should suggest when you're bringing that is, how do we test it?
Yep.
So that they don't feel you're saying we're going to come in and overhaul the review process, right? How do we test it? And so when you're in these trainings or you're going to these conferences, explore that with people at the event. Hey, that sounds like a really interesting idea. How would you start to sample and dabble in that? If you're struggling figuring out how you would even do that, get those ideas and ask those questions, because sometimes we want to ask those questions after the fact. And so just making sure that you have that in your mindset as you're going in, of thinking about, what's the thing I want to test? What do we want to go try? And if it doesn't work, that's okay. That doesn't mean it failed, and maybe it morphs into something else.
Yep. Exactly. And it would, ideally, all of this would tie into, what are our top 3 things for the firm? We talked about that at the beginning of the year, picking what are our top 3 areas for the firm, and then what are our top 3 talent, priorities? What are our top 3 priorities for tax, or the CAS group, or for consulting, for IT? And so ideally, these will fit inside of that, but we're always going to be innovating new ideas. And we have to say, how does that fit? And, what does that look like? And how is that going to further the direction that we're going to, want to take this? And so that's why it's so important to, stop and assess and say, what is most important? What are my top priorities here the next couple months. And we say 120 days because, through the summer is just like a good, time frame. It works with a lot of deadlines, not all. I know there's certain audits that start up in the summer. And so you always have to work around that, but you can just say, what am I going to further these next 120 days? Now, in Samantha's Gantt chart, since we're talking about Gantt charts, the other thing that I would put in it is PTO. Yes. And we have to make sure we schedule our PTO, our team schedules our PTO. And, even if they're not going to take a week off or something in the next 120 days, gosh, I would hope everybody would. But if maybe they have a fall, cruise planned or something, what long weekends? That's what I tell my team members. If they don't have anything planned, I'm like, great, what long weekends? Pick a couple long weekends. I know we have the 4th of July. We've got a couple of days off around that. We just heard another firm last week say they're going to close that entire week. So we're not, necessarily suggesting you do that. It would be a good morale booster and a good re-energizer, and especially if everybody stayed off email, like that was a rule. Because what happens is we say we're closed, and then I'm emailing, and then Sam sees it, and then she feels like she has to respond. So that's not very motivating. But at a minimum, what is our PTO, and how do we help people feel like they can take the time off and actually not to be on? And if it is a week, schedule specific check-ins. Like I'll check in on Tuesday and Thursday. Otherwise, I'm not going to be on my computer. If you need something, it's an emergency, text me. It has to be an emergency, and only one person gets to do that. So if I'm on vacation, we'll say you have to go through Jen. She's like the filter. And, that we're not all, texting the person on vacation. And because then Jen can say, it's not an emergency, or we can, solve that some other way, or it can wait. But people don't really feel like they can have time off, and they look at all their to-dos, and if it's not all laid out, it's just like all flooring around all this stuff they can do. They just don't feel like they can really, take time off. I think part of it also is we don't really leverage each other. That's one of the things with some of the coaching that we've been doing, especially of our managers and newer partners. It's like, how can you guys support each other in taking time off? You guys are working in teams. The client doesn't have to have you for a week or a long weekend. If you're taking a Friday and a Monday off, you actually can take that time off. They will be fine, and we can support them. But we feel like everyone else is so burdened. We don't ask for that. But we had some teams start to do that, and they really saw how they could support each other, and it was needed. And I could give back. I could support Samantha when she's on her time off, and she can support me when I'm on my time off. If it's mapped out, we know when that is, we can plan for it. So that's why it's so important to really get it scheduled, communicate it, lay it out, and figure out how it fits into everything else that we're doing.
And I just want to throw one quick thing on there, and that is get the leaders to do it, because when the team sees that the leaders are doing that and they trust them and run with, you guys can run with this while I take my long weekend or whatnot, then that'll actually prove to the team, hey, you guys mean that. And when I'm off, I can really disconnect as well. Yeah. That loyalty and that devotion is there, which is a beautiful thing, but it also can burn them out.
Yeah. Well, and I know some groups want to do some kind of retreat. That might be too big of a word, but I want to do some kind of a half-day team meeting. Maybe I want to do an HR team meeting, or maybe I want to do a off-site tax group meeting, and we'll do some business in the morning and then play together in the afternoon. And the more we can anticipate that, and then also to have that time to step back and do some of that relationship building, communicating, what else are we up to? What does the rest of the year look like? Let's start to anticipate that, raise issues, or, talk about questions, talk about staffing, new clients that might be coming on. I think that's really a great thing to do to rally the team. And again, summer schedules, I don't know about you guys, but mine's getting pretty full already between Boy Scout camps, and, we have a vacation planned, and, our team has different vacations planned, and, we have events and workshops scheduled already. So, we have to figure out how do we put that on the calendars? What does that look like so that people can anticipate it? And I think that's something that people will look forward to. So if that's something you've been talking about, let's make sure that, we get that on the calendar as well. And then we make it a priority.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think people are looking forward to having some time to get to ideate. Again, something I just heard right before coming on with you is, how do we just improve the process? And when we're mired in it, it's really hard to reflect on that. And you just came out of the busy season. Do it when all of that's fresh in people's minds, and where was the major pain point, and do it now, because the pain's going to get forgotten, and then we don't feel it again until the next busy season. And then, why didn't we fix that?
Right.
Let's do it when it's fresh in our minds. And so you want that time to be able to hammer through that.
And just pick a couple of things to go fix right now. And then keep the list. We can always go back to the list. Make the list. We can always go back. And then somebody will be excited about one of those things on the list. Let them run with it. Let them take it, and figure out, how do we, fit this in, and what does that look like? And, go scope it, go research it, at least start there. Maybe we're not going to get it done, quote unquote, right now, but we could go research it. We could go get smarter about it. And I think that's important. And it's good for morale and motivation. And it feels like we're addressing things. So this, Stephen Covey, Quadrant 2, proactivity, we're fans of, and we know it takes intentionality. We have to be intentional about it. So we just wanted to raise it here as, we're watching people emerge. And like I said, CPE and conference season is, starting, summer's starting, vacations. And we're like, whoa, we better get our arms around this and get that Gantt chart out and figure out how to schedule it. So any other final thoughts, Samantha?
No, I agree. Just make sure you balance it with the forward looking and some time off, and then just getting the work done. So it's a balancing act, but focus on those 3 areas.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here with me today, and have a good rest of your conference. Everyone else, have a good week, and we will see you next Monday. Thank you so much.